Thank you for my introduction, and thank you to Forward Ladies for inviting me again as a keynote speaker. So I've been given a brief, and that's to make you all dream big. So I've got about 15-20 minutes to try and achieve that. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to share my story. So I'm originally from Yorkshire. I was actually born in Bradford, and I was one of 4 children. And people ask, are entrepreneurs born? Is it in your genes, or can anybody become an entrepreneur? So for me, it was definitely in my genes. My father was an entrepreneur. He came to England in the 1960s, and he set up a plumbing business, which is now 3rd generation. And there's not many businesses that stand the test of time. Now, how did he set up his business? Well, he was incredibly brainy, but never did anything with his hands. He watched somebody plumb a bath, and he decided to call over his brother from India, who was going to do all the handiwork, and he was going to be the mastermind. And he set up this, it was an amazing plumbing builders merchants business, and as I said, the business was absolutely phenomenal, and went 3rd generation. So for me, it came from the genes. And I had an older brother and a sister, and I was number 3, and a younger brother. And again, training starts very early. So I have great memories of going out with my father at the age of 2. And in those days, he would leave me in the car while he went to his business meetings. You would never do that now. But obviously, all of those lessons were rubbing off on me. But it was a real conflict as I was growing up, because in our family, women's place was in the home, okay? Men went to work. So even though my father was very successful, it was all about men going to work. And I really shouldn't be stood here today, because my place was in the home, in the kitchen. And my sister before me, at 19, had an arranged marriage, and that was my destiny as well. No education. She sort of finished school at 16, and that was the plot. And then my brother, my older brother, he joined the business, and I was number 3. And right from an early age, I was breaking every single rule. And I think, you'll look at yourselves, you are all rule breakers. You challenge the norm. And if anybody tells you can't do something, you probably go and do it just to prove that you can. So, these are all entrepreneurial traits. So, I was always, I'd say, rebelling from a very young, early age to go and do things. And as I said, a lot of my lessons started early. So my father he also had a plumbing shop, and I used to love selling. And at a very early age, I know everything about plumbing, all the copper pipes and everything. And I'd love when somebody came in and they wanted the sockets or the 50, because it was a bit like a sweetie shop, and I'd get them. So, that's where I got my sales experience from. And then I always wanted to learn. So I desperately wanted to learn to play the piano, and I wanted to do things, and it was always like, you're not allowed. But I must owe a lot of my success to my mother, because she gave me the empowerment to do what I needed to do. And she always said, whatever you do, don't let me down. Don't let the culture down. You can go out, but you mustn't bring the family in shame. And I remember I wanted to do ballet and tap lessons, and she used to sneak me out of the house. And so my father wouldn't find out. And later, I can remember one day he did find out. He went ballistic, and by that time I'd got all these achievements, all these honour certificates, and she sort of brought him round. So you can change the norm, and it's about slowly changing that norm. So when I was about 15, unfortunately, my father passed away, and there was a lot of pressure on my mother, because all the extended family, not just my family, my older brother had got married, had a sister-in-law, she was from India. There was all this conflict going on about what the route should be for a young girl, and certainly, obviously my sister before me had had an arranged marriage, and there was a huge pressure that at that age, this is what should be next. And I was just doing my GCSEs, and for me, I've always wanted to work, always, for me, it was about work. And even at the age of 9 or 10 or 11, I was selling Herbalife. Can anybody remember Herbalife? Lose weight now, ask me how I'd go round with that badge and stand in the town, and I would get orders, and I would be selling Herb. And my mother used to go ballistic about what I was doing, how shameful I was, like standing in the town. And all my father's extended family just said, this girl is just so shameful. And, she's really, and what is she doing even going out to work? Because my father was such a successful entrepreneur. It doesn't stand him in any good right, what I'm doing. So, as I said, when my father passed away, and I got myself a Saturday job in Richards because I loved selling, I loved fashion. And again, everybody said that my mother had an absolute breakdown. And it was quite tough because she took all that abuse, but she said, you just carry on, but never let me down. So I worked at Richards shops for actually 7 years on a Saturday and during the holidays throughout my education. And again, everything was a battle. And again, if anybody says to you something that you can't do it, for me, I was quite self-motivated. I'll show you, I'll make sure I do it. So never, ever let that hold you back on anything. And I remember one of my mum's friends saying she's only ever going to get a B in GCSE chemistry. And I remember crying my eyes out, and then I ended up getting a first-class honours in chemistry. So, you have to use things as motivation. And again, I wanted to do my A-levels, and that was always not going to be allowed. But I did because, there was a bit of compromise and sacrifice. And I actually wanted to do medicine, but that was never going to be allowed because I have to go away to university, and I was never going to be allowed to go away to university. And also, because I'd be too old and nobody would want to marry me when I finished. So medicine was never allowed. So I actually battled through my A-levels, and I actually didn't do as well as I should have done in my A-levels. I think, with all this sort of going on. But there's always a time when you can excel, so don't ever think, well, I've not really done well then or not really done. Even now, you can all really go and excel, and you can be those multi-billionaires. Why not go for billionaire status? You can all do it. So I did my A-levels, and I, as I said, wasn't allowed to be a doctor. So I did chemistry. And in the end, I wasn't going to go to university, but I made a compromise with my family. I said, perhaps I could travel every day. I could go back and forth. Could I go to university? And that's the compromise I made. And the other thing in business and in life, if you want to be successful, you do have to compromise. So that's another lesson to take away. So I used to travel I went to Huddersfield and I did applied chemistry. I used to travel back and forth every day from Bradford, just about an hour and a half. But that was how I was going to get my university education. And throughout that time, I was always introduced to prospective husbands as well when I said no. So in my third year, and again, always take the opportunities that do come to you, that give you other experience. I worked for ICI at the time in the labs on my year out. And at the same time, I was still carrying on doing my job at Richards. And I decided that there was absolutely no way I was going to have a job which would put me in a lab. What I wanted was to go out to see doctors, because I wanted to be a doctor. I was a sales and a company car. That was my criteria. So I looked at what the careers that I could do. Not that I'm allowed to work, by the way, but I looked, right, I'm going to go into medical sales. So after my fourth year, I did end up getting a first, and I put my application in to get a medical sales role. You imagine by now, I'm 22, I've just got a first-class honours, I've seen about 50 men since the age of 15, said no to them all, and my mother is really panicking, and my brother and my whole family are really very nervous because I am not married, and that is the number one priority. And literally, after I got my degree, I did get my dream job. I got my company car, I got a medical sales, and I'm out there seeing doctors selling drugs. And ethically. So I land this job, and it was all a bit mad in about a few weeks, as I said. And as I said, the panic, not just of my mother, but the whole extended family, because, you know, I was the first one who went to university. And you have to be a trailblazer. You have to lead that change, because now in our family, it is the norm for girls to go to university. It is a norm for girls to have an education, and it is a norm to go and get a job and a career. However, I go to a lot of schools now still, and they're still where I was 25 years ago. So it's not the norm for everyone. So I get my job, and my mum's really like pulling her hair out and saying, you know, wasn't there anybody at university? Or, you know, we've seen all these people, there must be someone, because we have to get you married. And I said, there was no one, because in the culture, you have to be a certain height. I was too short. You have to have certain grades, and you have to have there's a caste system as well, so everything has to be matched, and that's quite difficult. But I said there was one person, and I suppose I thought about it, and I thought he's probably the best of a bad lot, really, because, you know, I remember talking to him. He was quite laid back and everything, and I remember at the time he was exactly the same background, business background, and, you know, I had to be married into a business background, so I didn't have to go to work, all that sort of stuff. And just as it happened, somebody rang my mother and said, you know, we think we found a suitable match in Derby. Would you like to see this person? And obviously she did, because she saw everyone. She went there with my family, the whole family, and she went and stalked them at their business all day long, because they wouldn't shut. So until she got in and saw the home, and she came back very excited. And I remember his father saying to him, you know, we think we found you somebody, you knew this girl from university. And he went, no, there's absolutely no way. So anyway, so cut a long story short, we were introduced the week after, and I thought to myself, you know, I remember him from university, and I thought, as long as he takes his tash off, and he walked in without a tash, but he had a really sad jumper, and I thought, well, I can change that. So we started having a discussion. And he said, you know, it'll be fine if we get married. We'll have a good time, but there's a few things I must tell you. You know, like, you've just got this job and things. You cannot go to work if you get married. You're not allowed to have a career. We've got a business. You can work in our business. And the other thing is, my mother is dying of breast cancer, so you have to be a carer, but everything else will be fine. So after about an hour, I said, you know what, it's fine, because I'm now 22, and it's like, since 16, it's like, it's really was getting, and I said, right, it's fine, we'll get married. So that was it. So within an hour, we decided, so obviously the family, everybody's really pleased. And so then afterwards, obviously I still wanted to continue to work. And I made sure I was the best at what I was doing. All my sales were up there. And then I had to break it to my employer that, you know, I'm going to have to leave this job because I'm getting married. And, you know, she was really angry, and she said, there's no way that you can give up this job. You're brilliant at this. You can't go and be a housewife or this or that. She was really quite passionate about it. But in those 6 months, I sort of brought my family around. You know, it's like that compromise. Right, if you want me to go and cook and clean the house and put the dinner on the table, I will do that. And my mum always said, and she even says to me now, she says, no matter how successful you are, put that dinner on the table and then you'll have an easy life. So that's the principle I follow. So I've forgotten which part of the story I'm at now. Stop. You're distracting me. Sorry? I've agreed to get married. So I said in that 6 months, I did actually sort of bring my family around. And we did within 6 months then, I got married, 23, moved to Derby, and it was my responsibility to move into the family home. And my mother-in-law, she literally kept herself going for the wedding. And I did bring them round, and luckily my employer gave me a transfer. They created a job for me, and I think that is what absolutely kept me sane going to work. Because as soon as I moved, within a month, my mother-in-law passed away. And I remember that whole responsibility. I never went into the kitchen to cook, but I did see my mother cooking. You learn in so many ways. And I remember picking up the phone, can you tell me? Because I went into the family home, the food had to be there for my father-in-law, there was a sister-in-law, I had to look after the home, I had to go to work and do everything. And you know what? I did that. And as I said, I became a very fabulous cook because we learn, don't we? We learn from so many ways. But, it's because that allowed me to give me the pass off for what I wanted to do. So it's about sacrifice and compromise. If it's all about you, there's something has to give. So, I've learned that for me to have been successful, it is that compromise. So I started my job in Bayer, and I was a medical rep for 8 years, had my first daughter. Then when I had my second daughter, somebody said to me, you should go for a promotion. It's really important you have mentors and people who push you, because you may not think about that next move. And I then decided I would apply for a promotion. Like with me, everything's always fixed in my head. I'm going to do this next. I'm going to achieve that. And that was when failure struck, because I didn't. And failure's really good. It's part of the success story. I didn't get this job, and I was actually on maternity leave when I went for it. I saw this role come up. It was a leadership role, going into sort of more leadership, and I didn't get it. And I didn't even want to ask for the feedback, but, it was too autocratic, too risk-taking, all that stuff. It just didn't fit. And I started going for other interviews. And at that interviews, I decided there's no way I'm going to work for anybody else for 8 years for them to tell me I'm not good enough. And that was it. I was never going to work for anybody else. And that's when I set up my own business. So my first business I set up in 2001. And I'm very grateful for the experience and that I had in the pharmaceutical industry, because it gave me so much negotiation skills, selling skills, all of that. And I was a medical rep selling a cholesterol-lowering drug, which was all the rage at the time. To have a statin. If you've had a heart attack or a stroke, you should have a statin. So when I would go and see my doctors, I would say to them, right, can we agree, these patients, they're diabetic, they're stroke, if they've got a cholesterol higher than 5, you're going to put them on a statin, my statin. And they'd go, yeah, absolutely, next week I will do that. I'd go back and say, doctor, you've not done anything. These patients aren't treated. And then I thought there must be something that I can do to make this whole process happen. And I absolutely loved computers. And I'd say to my doctors, can I find you these list of patients? So you'd never do anything like this now. Yeah, just go onto my database and you can just go and find the patients. So I'd go onto the computer and I'd literally sit there and I'd go search. Pew, here's your list. Doctor, here's a list of patients you need to bring in and recall and get these patients. And you know what? I saw my sales flying. I thought, you know what? I've got a business opportunity here. So to cut a long story short, I managed to get myself in front of the world's biggest brand, Lipitor, the world's biggest drug pharmaceutical company, Pfizer. And I sold my story. And you have to have passion and belief behind what you're doing. And like I said, I did break so many barriers. Where would you be able to go onto doctors' databases and just do what you did and change this and that? I mean, it's horrendous. And I even remember the pharmaceutical industry, lots and lots of governance. But I managed to do this pilot in an area where they saw the sales rocketing. And they said, bring her in here now. So I got in front of the marketing manager with a biggest budget ever going. And I talked about how my team could make a massive difference to all those millions of patients out there. We were going to prevent them having a heart attack because we were going to help the doctors' practices to find these patients. The brand would benefit because it's the best brand. It would be the best brand and it would reduce the cholesterol more than any other brand. And obviously then the government had just launched this scheme. Points meant prizes. So doctors got points for treating cholesterol, and that was their bonus, and it's still in place now, and we could help the doctors make more money. And before I walked out, I told them a big story about my staff and everything we could do this national project. There was only me, and I got a £500,000 project. I thought, oh shit, I better start recruiting people now. So that's how it started. And, we still work. That's my first business. We work with the NHS. We work with the doctors' practices. Our core business is clinical audit. And then in 2012, the business hub came along. But before that, my father was a philanthropist, you know. Nobody remembers him for the good he's done in business. It's all about his charity work. So all those things really have an impact. And even when I started my job at Richard Shops, I used to give away £100 a month just out of my salary every single month. It was just used to go all the time. And I remember being approached by Secret Millionaire the first time it came about. And I said no, because for me, if I'm not passionate about something, it's not going to be a success. So do what you're passionate about. If you're not doing something at the minute that you're not passionate about, leave it. Go off and do something else. People change careers all the time. So I got approached and I said, I'm not going to do it because I wasn't passionate about giving money away. I was passionate about making money. And then I watched the first series and I thought, you know what, it's a really good program for me to get into because it'll get me more into charity. And I went, and again, this is why mentors and experience are really good because they can shape your life and what you do. I went on a women's delegation to India. And I thought, you know, the business days would be the ones that are most exciting for me. But actually what touched me more is the charity days. And I saw a woman who'd come from here. She'd went over and 35 years ago. And her daughter had no right to education because she had cystic fibrosis. She was distraught. She changed it. She set up the National Spastic Society. She changed policy so that everybody in India had a right, whether they were able or disabled. Her daughter then got a double MA from Oxford. So there are no barriers to achievement. It's ourselves. And I thought, amazing. I want to go back and do some charity work. And as soon as I got off the plane, I got called. Another call, and I said, this time I'm going to do it. And I came to Birmingham undercover and actually worked with, I gave money away to a doctor's practice actually, and to a women's charity. And we took that charity, got involved with them after, and it was all about empowering women between the ages of 15 to 25, giving them the confidence. And that then took me on to a global role with the Global Girls Fund, which is part of Girl Guiding. And my role was to chair the fundraising of £10 million, and we did it in, we had a target to do it in 5, we did it in 3. It was just like business. I got to meet, we had a hit list, royalty, people who were into women, and I got to meet royal families and everything, and I would ask them, can I have money? And they would give it. And we got $2 million from UPS. They were our corporate signature sponsor because they had the same network, they were into women, they had a big philanthropic arm. So, you know, it was all just like business. So that, you know, that charity work, and at the same time, and I'm running out of time, I have 5 more minutes, I can't tell you all of it. And at the same time in that week, I got approached, somebody had said, my business has gone down, it was a recession, will you fund it? Will you fund it? I've got 700 staff wages to pay on the Monday. And I thought about the weekend, without any due diligence, can you believe I paid those wages without any due diligence? And it was an industry I've never been into, security industry, all male dominated, 700 staff. I decided to part with the money, but I'd take an equity stake. On the first day, I was a hero because I'd saved the jobs. On the second day, I was the wickedest witch ever. They all hated me. And I had to prove myself again. And those were two of the most toughest years I've had, but a great learning experience. Turned the company around and sold it. And as I said, in 2012, I set up a business hub where we provide back office support to over 300 companies nationally, things like call support, virtual PA, serviced offices, and all sorts of back office support. And that really came from, I started my business in my bedroom. And what do you need? You need a brand. You need a really good brand. You need a perception that you're bigger than you are. If I had told Pfizer it was just me, do you think they would have given me that contract? So you've got to dream big, think big. You've got to give that perception. You've got to have perception. It's not just about you. So that's why I set up the Oberoi Business Hub. So now, at the moment, I said, you know, I'm still dreaming big. There's lots of things I'm involved in. At the moment, my passion is to make sure every child in Derby gets fed. I've been funding breakfasts there because I feel that's our future. I come back doing local work. So what leads to success? Well, desperation. You need a lot of perspiration. You need some aspiration. and also inspiration. So I hope I've given you some inspiration this afternoon about dreaming big and continuing to dream big and go out there and really fulfill your goals.